Hello, welcome to this evening's virtual book talk, The Brothers You Choose with Paul Coates, Eddie Conway, and Susie Day. I'm Terry Taylor, the Education Programs Manager at the Reginald F. Lewis Museum. And we are excited to have Paul, Eddie, and Susie here tonight to talk about this long enduring relationship between these two men who were both formerly part of the Black Panthers Party here in Baltimore, Maryland. Following their conversation, we will open it up for you to bring up some of your questions and comments for our presenters. This book can also be purchased online at Haymarket Books. We will include the link in the chat box during this program. But before I introduce them, I want to also acknowledge entrepreneur Reginald F. Lewis, who the museum is named after, and whose birthday recently took place this month on December 7th. His desire to have a cultural organization about the African American experience is one of the reasons that the museum is here today. At this time, I want to take a few seconds to introduce our presenters. Paul Coates is the founder and director of Black Classic Press, which specializes in republishing obscure and significant works by and about people of African descent. A former member and Maryland State Coordinator of the Black Panther Party, he was instrumental in the establishment of the Black Panther Party archives at Howard University. Mr. Coates is also a former board member of the Reginald F. Lewis Museum. Eddie Conway is a former member of the Black Panther Party Baltimore chapter. Wrongfully convicted of a murder in 1970, he served 43 years in the Maryland prison system. Eddie is an executive producer for the Real News Network, as well as the author of The Greatest Threat, The Black Panther Party, and COINTELPRO, and co-author of Martial Law, The Life and Times of Baltimore Black Panther. And Susie Day is the author of The Brothers You Choose, narrating the lives of the friendship of Paul Coates and Eddie Conway. She also writes about prison, policing, and political activism. She's also a columnist for New York's Gay City News, where she writes political satire. And at this time, we will turn the program over to our presenters, and Susie will let you take it over with this conversation.
Terry, I just want to say you did good.
She did.
Thank you.
That was a great intro.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you
We're
very
not picking on home now. Terry did good. Yes.
I had to try.
You represented, girl.
All right. At this time, I'm gonna turn my webcam off and leave it to you guys.
We'll come back. Okay, I feel like we're kind of winging the introduction. Right before we started, I had sent Terry several photos of Paul and Eddie back in the day and Paul and Eddie now. And I'll read the first paragraph from this book, The Brother You Choose. And then Terry's going to run some of the photos, and I'll talk about them very quickly as sort of a way to get us into Paul and Eddie's story. So this book is about Paul Coates and Eddie Conway, who met years ago, neither one can remember exactly where or when, in the Baltimore chapter of the Black Panther Party for self-defense. Eddie and Paul are two solid, intelligent, funny, two very different African-American men who, through time, space, and all their many differences, remain connected. This book is about their lives, their politics, and their friendship. Just that simple, just that complicated. So basically, I want to make it clear that this book is way into the 90 percentile amount of words being Paul's and Eddie's. I basically just wrote the intro narrations and some explanations about Baltimore and Eddie's case. But the book is basically Paul and Eddie because they have magnificent voices and a magnificent friendship. This book particularly, this photo is of Paul Coates back in the day, and I think probably 1978, when his bookstore, the Black Book, no, it's earlier.
Yeah, Susie, can I say something? Because I really like this photo, and I look at it and I like it. That photo is actually in the basement of the bookstore that we had that was inside our house on Park Heights Avenue. The interesting thing about it is if you look to the left that's actually a light. If you, yeah, that would be to my left. If you look to the left, that's a light table. This picture actually is the beginning of Black Classic Press. Okay. It actually is weird. I used to use that to photo shoot the very first pamphlets that we did. So it's a combination. You got the Black Book and Black Classic Press right there together.
Okay, and Malcolm leading the way in the back.
Malcolm is there influencing the way, and my hat on and my jacket, which is a little small. You know, I'm styling. All right, I'll be quiet.
Oh, I do
want to say that that part that you said about two funny guys, I'm not funny. Eddie's funny. You can look at him. You see?
I was thinking she meant that you were the funny guy because I'm not very funny, but okay.
All right, sorry to throw you off track, Susie.
Okay, well, why don't we just have a vote in the chat about who's funnier as we go along? So do you want to do the next slide, Terry? Ready for that next slide? Or this
there
Eddie
it is.
Back in the day.
There
Eddie,
he
do
is.
you have any words to say about this?
No, that's me. That's how I used to look before these 50 years caught up to me.
No. I'm impressed. Very nice. You're very nice now, too. Moving along, this is Eddie grew up, I think, in the Cherry Hill part of Baltimore. And this is Paul Coates with his, can we go back a little to the, Paul. Paul Coates has 7 kids and then 2 more with his last marriage. This is a human pyramid of those kids in his backyard in Baltimore.
Yeah, and everybody is laughing. So my youngest son is Menelik, who's on the top of the pyramid. That's Ta-Nehisi right underneath of him. And then their brothers and sisters. Everybody's laughing because they know I'm going to knock over the pyramid. Okay. They already know it. I promised them I wasn't going to do it, but they already know what's going to happen. So we're having a great time.
Yeah. Who is taking the picture?
A brother who lived around the corner took that picture.
All right. Next. This is, Eddie, you might want to talk about this. This is in prison. Eddie spent almost 44 years inside various Maryland prisons. He was framed for the killing of a police officer in Baltimore. And while inside, he did amazing organizing. And this is part of it. This is a friend of a friend. He and Dominique, his wife now, helped start Friend of a Friend. And Mr. Conway is in the back row, I think second from the left. Do you want to talk about this, Eddie?
Oh, no, this is the program we established up in Hagerstown after they closed down the Maryland House of Correction. Prior to that, we had been doing the same kind of work, but we didn't have an official name for it. And we were doing it under the Veterans Organization. This is the beginning. This is the start of a Friend of a Friend program. Up in probably 2006 or 7 in Hagerstown.
Eddie, what was a Friend of a Friend? What was the program? Can you, because I'm sure some folks want to know.
Yeah, the Friend of a Friend program, we organized it on the platform of a popular education program that would create mentors that would eventually become peers. Part of the problem was that there was a lot of people going through the prisons in Hagerstown, everywhere else, and going back in the community without really any change in their perspective of the community, their relationship. And we know we needed to reach people, give them some other alternatives, turn them around. And I initially, to be quite honest, I was up there running around like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to talk to everybody that was leaving. And there were so many people leaving, I couldn't keep up. And that was when Dominique and I decided, well, look, let's just train enough people to reach out and change that situation. And so this is the program that grew out of that.
Is that soldier down at in the front row?
Yes, that soldier down in the front row, and he was working with me way years before that.
I hope he's watching tonight. So, okay. Can we maybe next slide? This is a quickie. This is me and my partner Laura Whitehorn visiting Eddie, like, I don't know, 8, maybe 9 years ago. And you see the corny backdrop. That's hilarious. This is in prison, but as you might know, prisons put down these stupid backdrops, like these woodland scenes and these beach. So it's like they can cover their own, ugliness. So there we go. Yeah. This is March 4th, 2014. Eddie Conway has just walked out of prison, out of the courthouse, actually, that let him out. This is Mr. Paul Coates hugging Eddie on the sidewalks of Baltimore. This is at a celebration a few hours later. This is Paul has given Eddie his cell phone. Eddie, his first call was to Walter Mosley. Do you want to talk about this, either of you?
Yeah, I think what happened was Walter called in while we were together, and I gave the phone over to Eddie to talk to him. And that still would have been his first call, which is kind of cool because Walter had kept up with Eddie's case the whole time, and so he knew Eddie. And it was just good that they could connect. Two of the stronger men in my life at that time. That's what that connection represents.
Yeah, and that cell phone has never left your sight since then, huh, Eddie? I mean,
no, that was Paul's phone. Yeah, that was Paul's phone. I doubt if he still have it now, because it's like 8 years later. No, not 7, almost 7 years later.
Yeah, no, but your own cell phone.
Yeah.
You're wedded. So, okay. Next photo. And this is Paul and Eddie now, or it was when people could go out. It was last February at the Real News where Eddie worked. So, yes, Laura and I had gone down to see them and talk about the book, and I took a picture of them probably just a few weeks before we all got locked down. So. Okay, so, and that is either Junkie or DA.
Okay.
Very helpful with the introduction. I want to make it clear that, history has talked about the Black Panther Party as sort of like being this kind of, well, we tried grandiose macho mistake, but that's history. And I think people like Paul and Eddie, their lives, their relationship, and thousands more people are confuting all that, and with a lot of really poignant, important stories of their own. And behind all this is, I think, the fact that the United States government had everything to do with the Panthers not working out. J. Edgar Hoover's COINTELPRO, or counterintelligence program, along with the NSA and other agencies, set up the Panthers as well as other groups to totally fail. And there were informants. And if you read the Brother Hughes, you'll get sort of an inside version of how that worked in the Baltimore Panther Party. But I guess I want to start out in terms of the Panther Party in Baltimore and the fact that the Reginald F. Gosh, I just blanked. Sorry, is sponsoring this. I want to ask you both to sort of think about your lives in the Panthers. Eddie, you were a lieutenant of security. Paul, you came to the Panthers when Eddie was already established and you were a community organizer. What if the museum gave you the opportunity to create an exhibit about the Panthers in Baltimore? What would you want to put in it? And most importantly, how would you want young activists of color to regard it?
I guess that's certainly a question for Paul, since I missed all the photos, I missed everything. I don't have anything at all relating to that past. So the only thing that I would say is that there might be pictures inside the museum now that I would take down, but that's a personal thing.
Yeah, I don't, Susie, for me, I would make sure there were plenty of pictures of the women of the Black Panther Party, plenty of pictures of the women, because I think that part gets lost so often. We had, like, Eddie's story becomes more of the typical story of the Panthers who were incarcerated, because you know that a lot of men were incarcerated, starting with Huey. But there were sisters that, you know, took beatings and fought, and actually there were always, to my knowledge, there were always more women in the Black Panther Party who served much longer and more steady than the brothers did. So I would want to make sure that the women were acknowledged. I'd want to make sure that the people in the community who really supported us and who respected the Panther Party, I would want to make sure that that connection was acknowledged. I was talking with someone the other day about how people supported us, you know? Like in Baltimore, in some cities, when there were conflicts with the police, the community joined into those conflicts on the side of the Panthers. You know, I mean, that's a history. And then they would just fade off into the background. You would never know who it was that was shooting at the police. In Baltimore, we didn't have that so much, but we had people who would stand up. You know, we had, Eddie, and this was when you, right after you were busted, I was busted about the same time and in jail. When I got out on bail and went back to the headquarters, Gay Street, the headquarters on Gay Street was surrounded by people who were camped out in front of the building. And they were camped out so that the police couldn't run up in the building. So they put themselves in between the police and the Panthers. That's the type of stuff that I would like. I mean, you see the Panthers macho in leather and berets and stuff like that. But what about these people who laid on the sidewalk and ready to sacrifice their lives to protect the Panthers? You know, we were behind sandbags, you know what I mean? So we were protected, but they sacrificed. That kind of stuff I'd love to see curated. I'd love to see that kind of thing highlighted in an exhibit.
And there are the programs too, like the most obvious is Breakfast for Children program. Yeah. The Panthers overall had like 36 different community programs going around the nation. You know, services to get people to the doctor, you know, clinics, education.
To the jails.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff I'd like to see. Yeah.
You want to talk about how you see younger organizers now, especially in the wake of the George Floyd killing and COVID and everything that's come along since then. How do you compare Black Lives?
That's an Eddie Conway question.
Uh-huh.
Well, okay, that's fair. That's okay. I view them in a very positive light. I understand that they are not Black Panthers. I look at the movement itself as a civil rights movement, although the reality is it's a human rights movement because it's about living and saving and protecting bodies, and not just black, brown, but all bodies really. But I think they're in what I would consider, just looking back as history, as a civil rights movement. And I think it will grow and become stronger, and they will learn and develop tactics that did not work 50 years ago for facing the struggle for tomorrow. So they got a lot of work to do. It's on them. It's not the case of passing the torch. It's the case of this generation has taken up the mantle and is trying to move forward to change their conditions.
See how well he did that? I told you that was an Eddie Conway question.
Yeah. You in the book, and a few years ago, you guys had a conversation about whether you were still revolutionaries or not. That was the thing to be. And back in the day, you and so many people I know who were part of militant movements back then believed so strongly that the revolution was just around the corner, next Tuesday. And so several years later, you were talking about whether you thought you still were revolutionaries. And Paul, you basically said you weren't that much. And Eddie, you said just the opposite. I'm probably still a revolutionary, but I think I would rather not be. I still believe in change. I still believe in a new world. At the same time, I'm too old to be out anywhere. Also, I can no longer be pigeonholed into this Marxism, that Maoism, or even anarchism. I have a vision for tomorrow, but I know that's 1,000 years away. I think that's so beautifully put. Do you have any more follow-up thoughts? How is that vision for tomorrow developed for you?
Well, for me, I can see a world where we can all share the planet, protect the planet, share the resources. The planet itself can sustain life that's already on it, and even many times more if it's used and protected. So I see that as a future, but I know there's a lot of education that's going to be involved. There's a long way to go to get there. But I believe that tomorrow, young people will be able to put some of those things in practice. I've watched basically what they are saying, and then I watch what they're doing. They're trying to actually build the society that they think is equitable to everybody. And I think they will come up with that, and the generation that follows them will be the ones that will manifest it. And so it might not be anything like I envision, but I do believe it'll be a humane society, provided we don't continue to adhere to not just the Trump, but that whole strand of people who just refuse to look into tomorrow and want to look back into the distant past. For whatever, I mean, they're getting certain privileges, and most of them are not, but the people that's orchestrating this kind of stuff has to be at some point addressed in the future by young people, old people, everybody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Paul, I think I want to about your life in Black literature by beginning with talking about your father. Your father was an integral part of awakening you in terms of your intellect, your curiosity, and your love for reading. And you write, or you say, my father was about educating us to the threats, how to deal with them. The police were not the largest threat. Ignorance was the biggest threat. What do you think about this? You got to be able to read the paper. What do you think? He had to have his newspaper, and at that point, television news was just coming into its own. I remember him lying in bed, watching the news, interrogating me about things happening in the world and challenging me with, oh no, right or wrong. And yet, you didn't discover or realize that there could be something like a genre of Black literature until you were like in the Army.
Well, you know, Susie, I think about that all the time, and you know, if you think about it, it's not that strange, because the fact of the matter is, the majority of books that we know now as Black books, the majority of those books were published after World War II. You see, they're actually published after the 50s. You start seeing the success of Richard Wright, then you have a few Black books published. And then you got James Baldwin, and you got a few more Black books published. It's really not until the 60s that there's this large, I don't even want to call it an explosion, but there's this large publishing of Black books that goes along with the so-called Great Society of Lyndon Baines Johnson, because money came available to publish a lot of books that were out of print, a lot of Black books that were out of print. That laid the foundation for Black books. So I'm discovering Black books really at about the time. The point of curiosity, though, was there, and again, I had read some Black books. I just didn't know that there was a body of Black books, that people actually before me had written about Black subjects that would affect my life and that would draw me in and give me understanding of what was happening in the contemporary space based on what they were seeing back then. It's sort of like Eddie talking about the folks who are coming and how they will understand things and they'll bring about change. It's almost like the ancestors knew or wanted to bring about change, knowing that they couldn't bring about change. They fought anyway to leave a record of their change. That's what, and what could be. That's what draws me in so much to Black Classic Press. That's the mission of it in terms of bringing particularly those books back alive and bringing them into print, because we have there's just a lack of appreciation in publishing for this type of work. What publishers chase are books that can sell right now in the moment. Those are not those old Black books, you know? So it's my task, it's my assumed task to make sure that those books, as many of them as I can put my hands on, at least receive another generation of readers, you know?
And yet, wouldn't you in some ways see what you're doing as revolutionary as what Eddie has done as an activist for the last 50 years?
No. No, I'm gonna avoid that term, you know. It's the term, you know, that it's that label, it's that box, and then it's the need to explain what revolutionary is, and you get compared to this one and get compared to that one, and even for yourself, you run around searching, what kind of revolutionary am I? Hell no, just do the work. Just do the work, you know, don't get hung up in the label of this, that, or the other. I remember when Eddie and I, there was a point that we came to. This was after the Panther Party. I had 5 kids at that point, not 6, 5, and I couldn't figure out how I was going to feed them. And I came to a point that in my brain I was supposed to be this revolutionary leading the masses of people to free Eddie out of jail. And I found myself talking to him in the penitentiary saying, hey man, this ain't gonna work. You know, this is not gonna work. I'm gonna have to figure out how I can feed my kids. You're gonna have to captain the ship. I'll be there to support you, but you're gonna have to captain it. I haven't called myself a revolutionary since that day, because I didn't feel very revolutionary telling him that I was going to go do what was important to do, and that was to take care of the kids, which he agreed with, you know, in that moment. So it's a label. The work of Black Classic Press is very important. It's very important historically to our people and to the world, because Black history is the world's history. It's U.S. history, especially. You don't have a history in this country without Black history. So it's very important, but it is not revolutionary in my estimation. If somebody else wants to call it, Susie, if you want to call it revolutionary, go ahead. You got it.
Yeah, because you know, people are beginning to write about James Baldwin as revolutionary now, and back in that day, you know, he was sometimes very harshly criticized by people who thought he wasn't militant enough. But anyway, let's go back
to. Let me just pile on that a little bit, because although Paul don't see himself in that light, the fact is the work that he is doing, the work that he have done over the years with me around the prison population, so on, has been really, really, really revolutionary in the sense that it has opened minds. It created people that are now walking around the street concerned about the community, that at some point in the past might have been destructive to the community, changing human lives. I think that's important, and have them see themselves as part of a universe of humanity. I kind of still recognize that label, but I won't and can't define it, because I have absorbed so many different concepts, and I've seen quite a few problems in all the different writings and teachings, you know. I mean, so some people get a little bit right here, a little bit right there. Nobody actually got it right completely, but collectively, it's about changing the world and creating a more humane society. And I think unfortunately, it's got to be labeled like that. So I label myself like that, but I'm where Paul is, doing the work. The theory is okay, you got to do the work. And that's what he's been doing. And that's what I like to think that I'm doing, even right now with the Real News. I think the Real News is just a electronic version of a network that's creating awareness, open people's eyes, representing their positions and giving solutions. So the labels are not that important. It's the work that needs to be done.
That's great. I agree. Well, then, why don't you talk about your work, not just in the Real News, but you also do a lot of organizing, especially with Dominique, in the neighborhood where Freddie Gray grew up and was killed.
Yeah, we before I got out of prison, Dominique, we had sent quite a few of our people home, and they came out and they started working with Dominique, and they started working at Ground Zero. Ground Zero is not just where Freddie Gray was killed, but Ground Zero, according to all the statistics in the state, is the place where most prisoners come from. It's one of the highest impoverished areas. It's the opportunities are just not there. So the people that came back said, well, we can change this. We'll turn it around. We'll give an opportunity for young people to have some life choices. And so that was 7 years ago. And somewhere along the line, Dominique stole a house. I mean, it was an abandoned house, but it was in good shape. We fixed it up and we organized a community center. That community center is still operational now. Sunday, in fact, we'll be giving away a lot of coats, toys, clothes for people. We continue to supply food in the community. And at some point in the future, we're actually going to build another building and create a community center that will allow young people to have some better life choices.
Mm-hmm. And you were talking about the Tubman house just now.
Yes, it's called the Tubman House in Baltimore.
Yeah, you grew up in where you were born in the Cherry Hill area, right, of Baltimore. And you've been there basically all your life, unless you were in prison away from Baltimore. You were still in Maryland. Can you talk about how you saw Baltimore growing up and then how you saw it after you got out of prison?
Well, I grew up primarily in initially West Baltimore and then in East Baltimore. And I guess my preteen and teenage years actually were in East Baltimore, not that far from Johns Hopkins Hospital. I saw the community, I saw the city as having a lot of problems. This is before I went into the military. But I also saw whole communities intact, workforces, people interacting and supporting each other up and down the street and even around the corner. It's true that if you go out and you do something, somebody around the corner will pick up the phone and call your mother. We saw you do this. We saw this. We saw that. You know, it was a community that for me was okay. It had, obviously there was poverty and it had problems, but everybody, the houses were intact. The workforce was pretty much intact. And people were interactive with each other in a very supportive way. God, after I went to prison, I got out of prison, and it was like I was telling somebody early on, my intention was to go and lay on the beach. I did all of those years. I had been dealing with maybe hundreds of thousands, but certainly tens of thousands of people constantly. And I just wanted to be away. I just wanted to have some peace and quiet. But driving through Baltimore shocked me. It looked like a war zone. The only thing that came to mind was some of the towns and cities that were left intact after the World War II in Germany. And we would go and have maneuvers and training and so on. And when I drove up and down the streets of Baltimore, I felt like I was in a city that had suffered the consequences of a war. And that was 40 some years later. It shouldn't have been like that. The unemployment, the poverty, the trees growing up in houses. And I could drive down the street and look through the second floor window of a building and see a tree in there inside the house. And so, just the plight of the community was really bad. It was like we had just really deteriorated as a city and a community. And it made me realize that, well, I, in all fairness, could not go back or could not go to the beach simply because young people need to have an opportunity to not grow up in that kind of environment.
You are sitting there in a house on Tioga Parkway that Paul Coates had a little something to do with. Yes? Sorry?
I was just nothing. I was just going to excuse me for cutting across you.
Okay, what?
No, excuse me. I was just gonna I was getting ready to ask something. I wanted to ask you a question, but go ahead and finish your point. I came in, I didn't mean to cross you like that. I'm sorry.
That's all right. So I was slightly changing the subject about the house that Eddie is living in now. You have a little something to do with, yes. That used to be your house, huh, Paul?
Yeah, you know what occurred to me? It's like they used to say it was the people's house. So I was hoping it for Eddie. It had my name on it, but it was the people's house. So it was, it's a place that we wanted to make sure, always wanted to make sure that Eddie had a place to come had come home to, because of course one of the things about getting out of jail, or even thinking that you're going to get out of jail, you got to have a place to come to. And so we always wanted to make sure of that. And we were very successful and able to do that,
Yeah.
And that, Eddie came out. One of the things we used to say, we used to organize, never knowing whether or not he would get out of jail, because it didn't look like it most of the time. The fact is that we used to organize, and we used to say, we want Eddie Conway in the streets so that he can contribute, so that he can give back to the community like he wants to give back. And so for Eddie to talk about not going to the beach, for Eddie to talk about the real news, he's really, really a success story. And I'm just so proud of every moment that we gave in his defense. And I say we because there were people literally all over the world. I was the on the ground person here in Baltimore, but people literally all over the world gave to him. And while we're talking about that, let me just take a moment, because we really should do this. I know we did it, we've done it before, but we need to acknowledge that Eddie's out because of the long work, especially of the lawyers. People like Phil Dantes here or there in Baltimore, people like Bob, who I'm having a senior moment on right now too. Bob Boyle, who's in New York, who is under the weather right now. But also, I spoke with yesterday Ed Nelson Candell, who was one of your early lawyers.
Yes.
He wanted to take this into court as a criminal case, and he felt that he could beat the case. Of course, we were Panthers, and it had to be a political case to show the people, point out the contradictions, of course, to people. But Nelson was saying yesterday how his one regret is that he wasn't able to take your case in the court, because he felt he would have beat the case and you would not have done that time, But there's so many people. Dominique came along as a supporter. Unfortunately, she's still there. But people actually gave, and they gave to Eddie because they believed in his case. They gave to Eddie and supported Eddie Conway because they didn't believe the narrative as the narrative was projected. And I just want to, this is an opportunity to thank all those people, and I just want to thank them. And then I want to ask you, Susie, because look, I know we must be running out of time. We are. Shouldn't we have some questions in here?
Yes, I
Because I
think,
think we only have a few minutes.
yeah, I just
Maybe
want
a
to make
question.
one final point, and then I think Terry can maybe handle the questions and
Okay.
pump them over.
Sure can.
This is a great success story, and one of the reasons it's a book is because there are so few success stories about Black people convicted of murder, especially of a police officer, getting out, friendships like yours surviving decades. You've lasted, but I want to also say that there are obviously 2.3 million people also in prison, and some of those people are also former Panthers. and they're still in. And we don't have time to list them, unfortunately, but a lot of the audience probably knows who they are, and they shouldn't be forgotten, and they need our support. So if you want to add to
Yeah, yeah. No, but I do want to ask you, because I don't have it. Can you hold up the cover of the book and let's
Yes.
do a reference, because I know everybody on the call wants to get the book. And it's, what is it, Haymarket.com? Is it Haymarket Press or Haymarket.com?
Haymarket Books.
Haymarketbooks.com. So people can get the book and they can get all of Eddie's charm there and Susie's wit and my questions.
Yes,
Let me add. You can put the book down. Let me add. I think the one thing that should be recognized here is that very few times you find Black love or love between men, Black men, or men in general. And I think this is a story of the love that two Black men have for each other. And so way back in the day, Paul was struggling to keep this house along with the press, along with everything else. And I kept trying to encourage him to get rid of the house. It was a liability. And he sat on it and he kept it, and he sat on it and he kept it so that I would have that place. And that was a hard, long struggle, but it was centered around his love for me, his love for the people, his love for what we did. And in turn, it showed me that Black men, and in prison, obviously, that's a no-no to even talk about Black love. And it's rare that you even get to hug because it's such a macho, dominant, unnatural environment, to be quite honest. But I think this story is about that love between two Black men.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, it's a strong thing, and it needs to be affirmed, and it's a lot more prevalent, I think, than people recognize. So do we want to go for questions, or?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, first, before we get into questions, someone is asking about the book. Can the book be purchased as an ebook?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you can do that online.
Okay, great. One of the questions is, let's see. One second. Do you see parallels between the Black Panther Party, and the BLM movement?
Well, I think I might have answered that earlier. I actually see that movement right now as a growing civil rights movement that will eventually recognize that it's a human rights movement, that will eventually recognize that in order for us to go forward, we're going to have to unify across the planet, because the problems that we have are systemic and they're planet-wide. So I see that as the beginning of that kind of a movement that actually led to the formation of the Black Panther Party at some point in the past.
Okay. Another question is, if you had a magic wand and could implement one piece of legislation for either on the local or federal level that you believe would have the most impact on African Americans, what would it be?
Give us our reparation. We want our money. And it would take forever to give it to us. It's so much owed, but that would be my magic wand.
Paul?
Okay.
I'll pass.
How does the identity of revolutionary and militants from today compare to the identity of revolutionary during your Panther Party days?
I don't really know how to answer that.
I don't think we can answer that. I don't know at this point. It's impossible to know at this point what revolutionaries of today look like. I know what they did look like, and I know that there's a tremendous amount around, and I know young people following what it did look like. But I don't know what it looks like today.
Yeah, and honestly,
Yeah.
you'd have to agree on a definition of what revolutionary is. What are we going to use as a definition of revolutionary? Without that as a definition and without it within a context, it's no way you could respond to that. You know, what do they look like? I have no idea. I mean, you know, I have no idea because see, revolutionary to J. Edgar Hoover in those days and revolutionary to Donald Trump may mean the same thing. I don't know if it looks like that to Black people. You know, I don't know. That's not a real good question to respond to.
Okay. Another question is, where can one start to help and assist prisoners that have been wrongfully convicted?
Oh, now that's a great question. Wrongfully, look, why are we talking about wrongfully? You know, I mean, look, so it's good to make moral judgments and good to make moral decisions. But the truth of the matter is we have a system. We have a system that imprisons people, and many of the people who have been called, you know, many of the people who are in jail are wrongfully convicted, you know? If the system were a just system, then most of those people probably wouldn't be there. I would, Eddie might take it a different way or have a deeper thing, but I'd look at how do we assist people who are incarcerated? How do we help those people transition back into life and become contributors to the quality of life that we all want? I mean, I wouldn't deny someone who was, let's just say the person is guilty of something. Why would I deny that person in jail the same thing I would give someone who didn't have it? That's just further punishment, and I'm not the person to do that. I want us to be restored as a people. I want us to be out. I want us to be loving each other and building with each other and contributing to each other. And that's the whole 9 yards. That means everybody. I don't think we ever distinguished, Eddie, when we supported people in the jail or whenever you supported people in the jail, if someone was guilty of something or not guilty or wrongfully convicted or what have you. I think the prisons become a leveling system, unfortunately.
You know, and I want to add to that. But first and foremost, it's important to know you can go on the internet, you can look up hundreds and hundreds of organizations throughout the country. You can find some in your region. You can get in touch with them, and you can start working, helping, and supporting them. So, I mean, there's thousands of places that you can go on the internet and figure it out. The truth of the matter is the criminal justice system is rigged. It targets people of color primarily. 76% of them are black and brown or red bodies. That doesn't relate to the position of those groups in the American society. They might make up collectively 25% of the American population. So the prison system has a institutional racism, from the criminal justice system to police on the beat, to the prosecution, to the appeal system, etc. You cannot expect that most 80% of the people probably that's in prison took plea bargains of some type, you know, because they needed to not have a whole lot of time. So the system has never been fair. We can't reform it, but you can get in and make change is significant enough that if you work collectively across the country, things can change. But it's work that's been done, and it's work that continues to need to be done. Because one thing, and I'll just add this, if we don't do stuff to make people whole in the prison system, then we will continue to see people, and everybody, 90% of the people comes home. We'll continue to see the problems we see now on the ground in terms of the violence. And the violence is not necessarily a prison-related thing, but it's a God-related thing in terms of how the prisoners are being treated. And then individuals come home really damaged. We can fix that.
Mm-hmm. If I could just quickly add, just from a partisan perspective, there are, like Eddie said, lots of brilliant organizations to help support people in prison and get them out and abolish prisons. One of them is Release Aging People in Prison, which is based in New York, but it's also moving to other states slowly. But there are many organizations. Look around and get involved.
Great. There's a question, two questions. One is, can you share a bit about the case against Eddie? And then the other one is, can you share a bit of history about the establishment of the Baltimore chapter?
Yeah. Eddie, you can probably start on both of those, and maybe I can add something. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah, and I'll try to keep it brief. The start of the Baltimore chapter grew out of the assassination of Martin Luther King, primarily. And it's the first kind of Panther-related activities in Baltimore, I think, is noted there. Unfortunately, it was founded by an agent provocateur that worked with the FBI. We always thought he was, later on, that is, national security. He ended up infiltrating Black organizations in both Canada and the Caribbean. And so initially, the Black Panther Party here in the city looked like a social gathering and a party, but it was really used to monitor and observe people that wanted to make significant change. And at some point, he was exposed. That's how I think I got in the COINTELPRO records. He left, and of course, he went on to do damage in other places. But I think at that point, then the Baltimore chapter started getting its feet up under it and doing work, building the breakfast program, and doing dozens of other kind of programs. In terms of my case, there was a Panther police shooting. A couple of Panthers got locked up. At some point, the government decided to include me in that. So they put me in there, and they didn't have any witnesses or anything to justify that. So they put an informer in my cell, and they used that informer and a police officer who claimed he knew me, which was impossible because he didn't. I didn't live where he thought I lived, and I wasn't in that particular community at all. But Nelson Kendall, who I will acknowledge, wanted to do a criminal trial. In hindsight now, if we had did this as a criminal trial, I probably wouldn't have done 44 years because there was no case. There was never a case. But we were angry. We were trying, for me, it was like I went along with the politics and the politicalness of it because I honestly didn't believe anybody could go for that. would fall for that. A jury of 12 people would, but I didn't know about the newspapers under the control of COINTELPRO or news reporters, agents all over creating a certain kind of climate against the Black Panther Party that eventually caused me to get convicted and do this time. But if it had been a criminal trial, probably would have went home the next month.
Yeah. So I just want to add, the person that Eddie is talking about who founded the chapter was Warren Hart. And that's a name that like, I don't mind saying over and over and over again. The Baltimore chapter is unique in this sense. Like no other chapter has been documented that a police agent actually founded the chapter. Okay, was actually the founder. I'm sure some were, but in Baltimore, it's documented. And it's documented not so much in the FBI files, because we can't find it in the FBI files, but there was a case that Warren Hart did in Canada. And the Canadians actually first they used him as an agent, but then they threw him out of Canada. They reneged on him. This is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. They used him against Black people in Canada. He went back to Canada several years later to testify. In his testifying, he had to give up the whole history of what he had done in the United States for the federal government. And so his activities in Baltimore, he didn't give all the activities in Baltimore, but he gave enough that it's well documented that he was an agent and he founded this chapter here. The other thing about the Baltimore chapter that's significant, this also is documented, and we have to credit Larry Gibson for this, because Larry Gibson fought one of the Panther cases single-handedly, and this came out. A young man was killed. He was tortured and killed in the Panther headquarters on Gay Street. This is before my time, but he was killed. And as it turns out, there were at least 6 agents on the killing of this young man in the Panther headquarters. The interesting thing is these 6 agents, they weren't working for the same agency. They were working for about 4 different agencies. And so in between beating this guy and torturing this guy, they would go out and report to their contacts. This is Larry Gibson. Larry Gibson fought one of the trials. And this stuff came out, and they actually had to drop the charges of murder because the police, the local police, Baltimore City Police, the state police, the FBI, and several other agencies controlled the informers that were actually doing the killing and the torturing. So they ended up dropping it. But we'll always be grateful to Larry Gibson for exposing this and bringing this case out. He's an unheralded. He's known for many things in this town, but that part of him busting this case open, this wasn't done in any place else in the country like Larry did it here, and he did it single-handedly. So that's it. And I know how are we doing for time?
Oh, it is a little past 8 o'clock.
Okay. So where are we? Do we have other questions, or do we have time, or what?
Well, we have several other questions, but I was going to, due to the time and respect to people's, time, I was going to probably just take one more question.
Okay.
Okay. Well, the last question I saw was, if you don't mind sharing, what has been the effects mentally of being falsely incarcerated for abundance of your life? How did it affect your relationships from family to those in the Black Panther Party?
Wow, that's a deep one.
Yeah, and I'm still trying to assess the damage that was done. I obviously I really lost good bonding time with my family, with my children, with friends, inside and outside of prison, because you make friends in prison and the next month they're shipped to some other prison and you don't get to see them for decades. So it's been devastating in terms of social relationships. I got nieces and nephews that I have no idea what they look like. And, you know, I miss the stuff that happens with families. So that's been damaging. The other thing is in order to survive a prison situation like that, you have to be self-contained. And in addition to that, I was organizing a lot in prison. So it also made me a target. And it required me to be even further self-contained and not paranoid, because I've never been paranoid, but you always have to be on alert. It took me several years after getting home that I kind of relaxed a little bit, but I'm still self-contained, and self-containment is really not good for a human. We're social beings, and that's something that I'm still working on.
Great. Okay. I think at this time we are going to, I guess, wrap up. I wanted first to say thank you, Paul, Eddie, and Susie, for tonight's talk.
Okay.
It's been really awesome. I don't know if you guys have any last remarks that we kind of want to kind of put a nice ending to before we end tonight's program.
I definitely do. I want my remark to be an acknowledgement of Susie Day, the author of the book. I kept trying to figure out how we could swing this back around. When Susie talks about this book being about 95% Eddie and my conversation, that's really what it is. And it's not, I didn't know how this was going to work out. I didn't know how she was going to do it. I knew she's a great writer. But for Susie as a white woman to get in between two Black guys,
I'm white?
to allow our conversation to be our conversation, without trying to prove how woke she was or how this she is or how that she is, I don't say it took some doing, because I accept that that's who you are, Susie.
Thanks.
But I'm just glad that it worked, that you were able to work it the way you worked it. And I just want to acknowledge you for that and encourage people to take witness of that. This was a story that thankfully you saw value in, and were able to get it told, but you knew how to get out of the way and just let the story be. So thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
well, Paul, I mean, let me just say, if I can, there was no other place for me to be except out of the way, because both of you have lived such amazing, profound, very troubled lives, like most people. I mean, from the time you were kids, and if you read the book, you'll see the different childhoods and what they've gone through. But the fact that you have been able to go through all that and make it yours and become so courageous, and I have to say again, funny. They're not very, very funny tonight, but you know, the fact that you can own all that and be such magnificent individuals it's one of the deepest lessons I've ever known, just to listen to you guys. So
Thank you.
Okay, and if I have a final comment, probably it is to everyone that's listening and everyone that they can reach, is to find the thing that you think you can work on changing to make this a better society, and do it. Don't neglect your family. Don't neglect your work. Don't neglect your passions, but find what you can do to contribute to changing this society as we know it.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Yes, there's
And I-
lots. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm
No,
sorry.
I'm just saying, Terry, thank you. Thank you for bringing this, for organizing this and bringing us together.
Oh, no, not a problem at all. It was my pleasure. And there has been a lot of positive feedback in the chat about having this program tonight. And just wanted to let you all know that by various people. In fact, some people wanting to know how they can get in contact with you and reach. There has been also comments about the book as well. I think it looks like it's sold out, but then it's also mentioned that there's a, what is it, a book order or something that you can get. Yeah, that's also listed. So people are definitely very interested. And I just want to say that if you enjoyed this program tonight, you can support the museum by becoming a museum member or providing a donation. That information is online in your chat box. You can go there, or you can go to the museum's website under support. And we're also offering a free museum mask covering if you become a member this month. Lastly, I want to tell you that we will be celebrating Kwanzaa during the holiday. All of our information can be found on Facebook. We will be having another talk on cooperative economics in reference to Black businesses and COVID-19. So hopefully we'll see you on December 27th. But I want to again thank Susie, Paul, and Eddie for tonight. This has been awesome. Thank you for giving us your time in this discussion, and we could have gone on much longer. And without anything else, I'm going to, I guess, end that, and we're going to call it a night.
Thank you, Terry.
All right, thank you.
Welcome.
Take care,
You're
everybody.
welcome. All right,
All right.
bye.
Okay.